We are live.
Great. I did hear a teeny echo, but I think it went away once you muted, Katie. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Maggie Ullman, and this is our August 19th, 2025 Planning, Economic Development, and Environment Committee meeting. And we are all remote, participating virtually. To help folks follow along, if you're listening, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the hub link on the front page of the city's website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. For those of you out there, hello. For today's meeting, in addition to listening by phone, you can call in and comment live during the meeting when we have the public comment section. If you would like to do that, use the number 855-925-2801, and the meeting code is 8187. Your phone will be muted. You'll hear the meeting live. At this point, speakers will need to push *3 to enter our speaker queue. I'm going to do a roll call of the staff and council members. We have a full house, so look alive, everybody. If you can come off mute and say, hey, that would be great. So welcome to our councilwomen. First, Sage Turner.
Good afternoon.
Councilwoman Roney.
Hello.
Assistant City Manager Ben Woody.
Good afternoon.
Janice Ashley, our Deputy City Attorney.
Good afternoon.
Carly Gillingham, our Assistant City Attorney.
Good afternoon.
Hello. We also have Steph Dahl, our Director of Planning and Urban Design.
Hello, everyone.
In addition, we have Dana Frankel, our Downtown Projects Manager.
Good afternoon.
We have our Transportation Director, Ashley Hare.
Good afternoon.
As well as our Assistant Transportation Director, Jessica Morris.
Hello.
We have our new Parking Services Division Manager, Sabrina Tolley. Did I say your last name right? Tolley?
Holly, good afternoon, everyone.
Holly, welcome. We're so happy you're here. Thanks for joining the city and can't wait to work with you more.
Great, thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we have Mark Matheny, our Development Services Director.
Good afternoon, all.
We're almost done, everybody. Good job. We have a couple more awesome VIPs. John Philman, our Community Events Manager.
Hello, good morning. Good afternoon.
Nikki Reed, our Director of Community and Economic Development.
Good afternoon.
We have James Shelton, who will take us on the second half of our call, he's leading our Community Development Division as well as our CDBG-DR.
Good afternoon.
And then Rachel Taylor, our Economic Development Division Manager.
Good afternoon.
Whew, full house, everybody. Great job. We did roll call. Okay, now we're going to shift over to our actual agenda, which we have two main topics, a lot of discussion probably. But before we get into those main topics, our first item is to approve our minutes from last month's July 15th. Would anyone like to make a motion?
So moved. Second.
Great. I'll proceed with a roll call vote, as is our practice with virtual calls. Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Myself, aye. The motion passes. Our minutes are approved. Okay, next we'll go into our agenda item number 2, which is an update on proposed downtown activation strategies. And before we dig into the presentation, a couple things. One, there's a lot of ideas in here. I think there's 5 different categories that a variety of staff are going to present on. As you'll recall, the impetus of these ideas is really to see if we can come up with something or some things that support downtown activation, in my opinion, early this fall before we get into our really busy season, as we're still on the heels of recovery less than a year out. But as we'll see across these different 5 areas, some of these have a lot more question marks. Some of these might be more clear. So I encourage us as councilwomen to be thinking, among these 5 topics, are there areas that we're just like, thanks for digging in, we're not that interested in this. We don't see a there. Are there topics that are like, I have a lot of questions, but maybe there's a possibility here. Let's just keep this in committee and discuss more. Or are there things that we're like, well, we still probably have some questions, but there's enough here. Let's move it on to council so we can get the benefit of hearing what all of our colleagues think and moving it forward. So as we go through, we'll take each topic and staff will quickly go through the slides. We'll pause to discuss each topic, and then we'll move on to the next. And then at the end, I'd like us as councilwomen to kind of be looking at these with that lens of what are the three paths? Do we leave it? Do we discuss in committee more, or do we ask to move it on to council so that staff can get some real clear direction from us? Because there is a lot of topics here. And maybe we come up with a package that helps do activation for council to consider. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Dana, who I think will take us through this discussion.
Great. Thanks so much. Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. A few of us will be going through this presentation, and we also have more staff standing by to get to any of your questions, and we'll pause after each subject area. So we can go ahead and move to the next slide. Thank you. So I'll start by just acknowledging the city's role and the importance of the city's role in supporting an active and economically resilient downtown, which in the context of recovery feels really critical. And while we're working on a number of initiatives in the context of recovery and otherwise, we were asked by this committee to analyze some specific downtown activation strategies. So we'll be doing that today. One of those we will dig into a good bit is social districts, which enables a different model of alcohol sales within a defined area as a tool to support economic and pedestrian activity. We'll also talk about the way the city enables activation through its outdoor special events office and through its permitting process, how we support events and event organizers in that way through our current policy framework, but also talk about some of the limiting factors in that and some policy considerations. We'll further explore some of the fees that have been brought up as potential barriers and respond to some proposed ideas related to shifting parking fees and around parking enforcement changes. Also, so just key takeaway, many of these changes that could be considered would require some additional source of funding. Many would require additional staff time. And I think with that, we can move to the next slide. So an outline for what we're going to talk about today: social districts, open streets, parking adjustments, food trucks, and the noise ordinance. And after each of these, we will take a pause and give some time for discussion and questions. Next slide, please. Social districts. Okay. So social districts are areas that can be designated by cities or counties where individuals may legally carry and consume alcoholic beverages that are purchased from on-site ABC permitted businesses. So this is enabled at the state level, and I want to again draw this distinction between what this looks like and what this looks like right now when there's outdoor special events on streets where people are drinking alcohol. So during those events now, there's a distributor, and that event organizer is responsible for purchasing and selling that alcohol. You are not allowed to walk into a business, purchase a beer, and then go walk out into the public space. A social district would enable that. These in North Carolina are generally where we've seen them deployed. There are currently 55 registered social districts in North Carolina. They're generally in downtown areas and really used to support economic and pedestrian activity. Also want to point out that social districts don't inherently involve street closures. It just is specific to how alcohol can be purchased and consumed. Next slide, please. So just wanted to outline some of the legal requirements for establishing social districts. In order to establish a social district, the days and hours with which those alcoholic beverages may be consumed have to be clearly defined. Specific signage has to be posted that lists those days and hours. There has to be a management and maintenance plan. Geographic boundaries must be clearly defined. An ordinance must go through city council with all of these details, and all of that information must be posted publicly and submitted to the ABC Commission. So the way that social districts were discussed at this committee last month is that it could be deployed alongside outdoor special events. So we dug into this a little bit further to explore that type of model. North Carolina's social district statute does not, isn't really set up for that, but it also doesn't expressly prohibit that a social district would just be active during outdoor special events. We found 3 cities in North Carolina that have implemented event-based programs, and each of those have been set up a little bit differently. And so I'm just going to go pretty quickly into what those have looked like in those 3 cities. Next slide, please. So in Pinehurst, they set up a social district that was tied to about 4 very specific events that they held during the course of the year. So they would have that date, those times specific in their ordinance. They pass those annually. However, they're currently retiring that social district. They just found challenges. It sounds like with just it catching on, people knowing that it's happening, it just didn't get a lot of traction. Wilmington, North Carolina, enacted an event-based pilot program as a way to test a social district. So they picked 3 Saturdays in February of this year. They passed an ordinance that outlined those days, those hours, the boundaries, and worked with some private entities to do that, nonprofit entities to do that, and that was a way to test the program. And I'm going to go a little bit more into Wilmington. China Grove is the only city we found that passed their ordinance that was a little bit more broad, that wasn't specifically tied to very explicit dates and events, but had language that said the social district was tied to town events. In the case of China Grove, it's for their 1 annual Farm Day event every year. Next slide, please. But from a legal standpoint, our legal team also, and they are standing by, reached out to the ABC Commission, who basically said it would be acceptable if the city framed its activation of social districts through, in an event-based way. But just want to be clear that it's not something we've seen a lot of in North Carolina. And still, we would need to make sure that the dates and the times and the geographic boundaries was all very clearly made available and posted. Next slide, please. So wanted to dig a little bit more into Wilmington. It's an interesting example. They piloted 3 Saturdays in February for a social district in a defined area. There's actually a couple nonprofit groups that work to make that happen. They handled pretty much all of the expenses above and beyond typical, services that the city would normally provide. And the feedback was really positive. There was no city cost above, again, what was would normally be provided. There was no calls to the police, emergency services, and businesses reported that they saw 3 to 4 times their typical sales. Feedback was largely positive. There were some concerns about noise, parking, drunkenness, but in large part, they considered it a success. Next slide, please. So following that pilot program, Wilmington decided to, in conjunction with that pilot program, Wilmington set up a process to consider social districts, the establishment of social districts longer term. They're actually considering that establishment today on their council agenda, but they've set up a process. They have a social district advisory committee. Applicants, so that could be a nonprofit or neighborhood organization, could apply for a social district. They've set up a specific percentage of businesses that must be in support and the types of businesses that would need to participate. And there's $1,000 fee, which I assume is for the staff time it takes to kind of get through this process. They have to have the boundaries, the signage plans, management and maintenance plans, and their proof of community engagement. That's then submitted to their social district advisory committee. If that gets through the committee, council then reviews that proposal in the form of an ordinance, and they have this social district established. So this model really leverages, public-private participation. It really looks to the private sector to kind of fully flesh out what this looks like before coming to the city or before coming to their council. Next slide, please. So we did just kind of round up some of these hard costs to help the committee be just as informed as possible about what this looks like in practice. What I want to point out, and there's not a lot of costs associated. There's requirements related to signage and related to, having cups labeled and things. It really depends on, costs depend on what the district looks like. If there's an event-based social district, the city would still work with that event organizer to do all the things that we normally do in association with an outdoor special event. So in that way, again, in an event-based social district, there wouldn't be a lot of extra expenses, but just tried to lay some of that out here. Next slide, please. And just in a more visual format laid out what a process would look like. So if a social district pilot were to be pursued, that could look like, event engaging, that could look like staff engaging with event organizers, ADA, and other groups who might organize events throughout the years, gauging their interests, exploring what those boundaries are, exploring what those dates are. That could be, in a small time frame. It could kind of figuring out what that scope and what that pilot would look like. Of course, work out all the details, would need to come to council with an ordinance, and if supported, would proceed with all the previous steps mentioned. Next slide, please. All right, so I'll pause here. We got through that actually pretty quickly. And let the committee have discussion. We have several staff standing by to help with questions.
Thanks, Dana. Appreciate it. A question I had that I've heard from the community is around where this would apply. And I see we don't really have maps yet. Maps take time to produce. But in particular, was hearing some folks on Wall Street that they aren't as interested in this, where I have heard from folks on the South Slope that they are more interested in this. Lots of questions around this in general, but I just want to kind of put out there that digging into the where could be important. So maybe it's not actually a question, but if Wall Street's not interested in this, then okay, let's not talk about it there. Is I guess a thought. So I'll see if there's questions from folks. I do have kind of some point of views that I want to share on this, but see what comes up from other colleagues. Sage?
Thanks. Really just some kind of operational questions. So when I think ADA originally presented this or brought it up, were they suggesting that they could be that program administrator, like they would take on the social districts management that we all just heard in that process?
My sense was they were for events that they produce, but not for all events. So, because they don't own all events in town, but for ones that they are stewarding, that they would roll that, they would play that role, but say, Maggie and Sage event production comes to town or develops.
First Fridays on the block, not necessarily. Yeah. Okay.
So it would be event specific.
Okay. And then have we ever heard or put out a number as a cap on events or anything? I didn't know if that had ever been said. And then I think for the folks that I've been hearing from, I think there's still a lot of misconception about what this is in the community. So this was really helpful and explicit. The only thing we didn't really mention is one thing I hear a lot is, does that mean that if this is tied to an event that they can leave that event and go elsewhere? And I know that it is attached to an event boundary, but I just wanted to explain and confirm that that is the case, right? So being event specific means the boundary of that event as well, right?
There would be a boundary established for the social district,
Okay.
and you could not leave that boundary.
With the alcohol, right? Okay. And then typically we as a council will see certain events on consent agendas. Wouldn't that just kind of come to us the same way? Each year, the events. I
That's
mean,
fine.
I'm saying, for example, we're already doing a similar process, right? Council's already used to seeing the list of events come to us, the allocation of or allowance of ABC permits and that stuff. So we're just kind of like folding this into that, right? It's not a new process, right?
Dana, are you able to answer
I'll take
the?
a stab. I mean, there would be an ordinance specifically addressing the establishment of the social district.
Right.
So we, legal would help with that and how it comes to you. It would be separate from what
Okay.
you see now specifically related to alcohol. There would be boundaries, there would be dates. It's a little bit more.
We get all that information, I guess is my point. There'd be process.
I'll just add one thing too, because I think I missed this point on the key takeaways. Staff has not done broad-based engagement on exploring social districts, and also kind of in response to Marie's points.
Okay. And then one last question. I'm glad to see that Wall Street has expressed some interest in not being a social district, but they also have they want to be a pedestrian only district. So I guess I saw that on the list of options we'll talk about. So I'll bring it up then, but I think it could be exciting to mix it up. That's all from me. Thank you.
Kim?
Thanks. Dana, I heard in your presentation that staff reached out to the ABC Commission. Can I just get some clarity on, is that the state ABC Commission or the local ABC staff?
Carly, could you chime in here?
Yeah, absolutely. I was the one that reached out. It was the state ABC commission. I actually first reached out to our local ABC, and they referred my question to the state ABC to best answer it. And I spoke with the legal department over at ABC.
Okay, because I know that we didn't have an ABC board meeting for July because they're on summer break. So I guess one of the lingering questions I would have for our local ABC board is staffing capacity for compliance issues. In our last PEDE meeting, the way that I was hearing it was that we were going to take on the outreach because we know that there's city staffing capacity issues with doing community outreach. My personal outreach has included South Slope businesses, MODA retail businesses, ADA members, folks on Wall Street. We got a letter from them, Asheville Food and Beverage United, to understand where the workers are at. They don't have like a formal position at this time. And then downtown residents, which we also have a group letter from. And so I guess one of the curiosities I had was, before we were to take a next step on which direction this has gone, based on what the chair has offered at the beginning of the meeting, I wondered if we might discuss open streets first, because I think there are some areas where the benefits could actually come from that part of the activity and engagement.
Got it. Like you're saying, there might be some synergy, or just as you're thinking about them, I hear what you're saying. I won't rephrase it, but that makes sense. So yeah, we can keep moving towards there. Any other questions? I guess I'll say too, since again, we have a lot of these topics and only so much time. I would only be interested in this if it is event-based at this time. And so I know that's kind of been a question, and seeing these examples from across the state, that continues to be something for me of like, that's where I am. Also, I'm only interested if this is piloted, because I don't want to distract our staff from the rest of our work plan to do 6 months of community engagement or more that might be necessary for a permanent change. But I'm really excited and inspired by the ULI presentations over the last couple months, where they were saying stuff like, stop waiting for perfection, act boldly, act swiftly. I'm okay trying this and then going, wow, that didn't work out how we wanted. Let's cut it after the pilot. but I hate waiting and churning and churning and churning, and that takes so much staff time. So for me, if this was a pilot, if this was in the downtown neighborhoods that want it, right? South Slope is kind of like not for us. And if it was event-based, I have interest in seeing more. So I just want to say that, and I hear you, Kim, saying you want to kind of talk about the other one before you weigh in, and that's fine. I just wanted to say where I am on this. Sage?
Similarly, I'm interested only in event-based. Pilot is fine with me. But I do want to name one more thing that I heard in the community about this, that just for perspective's sake and to name it. I think some of the frustration I heard in many responses from people was, why is this all we're focused on? Like, why is this the priority? And I think that comes from both the lack of awareness of all the initiatives. And obviously that slide with all the things speaks to doing more than just an alcohol expansion district. But I get that because, you know, on another hand, I wish we were saying we've got this amazing arts district rebounding plan and it's next on the agenda, right? But this is right in front of us. I'm not happy that it's like one of our first initiatives, but I feel like we've got another organization ready to launch it. It's a low-hanging fruit. We know these events are bringing in, I think the number was $400,000 in residual funding for each event that, I'm sorry, I'm talking about events, not social districts, but you know, the impact to the local businesses is felt. And sales tax, I'll remind us, which is also our budget, you know, a little, I don't know, hard number to swallow sometimes. So I'm pro it, but I want to name that the community wishes they were hearing other initiatives alongside it. And I understand and respect that frustration. So may we be bolder, to Maggie's point.
And well said. I mean, I wish it's kind of the like walk and chew gum vibe in my head of like, yeah, you should have listened to HCD an hour ago. That was awesome. That committee's doing some really cool stuff at the same time, you know, and this is the planning and economic development effort. And do I think this is like a silver bullet? No. Do I even think this is like the coolest idea out there? Not necessarily. However, I'm interested in seeing like, what can we do quickly that's low hanging fruit? What can we test quickly that's low hanging fruit? So to follow my own guidance, I'm going to wrap up my words and let us keep moving so that we can get through all the content. All right, next.
John Philman, you are up.
Okay, here I am. Good afternoon. I'm John Philman, the Community Event Manager with the Department of Community and Regional Entertainment Facilities. Let's start with a big idea, open streets. Originally, open streets programs began as global initiatives to encourage physical activity and public health by temporarily closing streets to vehicles and opening them for people. They make space for walking, biking, dancing, skating, really anything that connects us more directly to our streets and to each other. In Asheville, we use this term a bit more broadly. For our purposes, open streets includes block parties, street festivals, and other special events that rely on parking and street closures. Even when an open streets event is intentionally simple, maybe just neighbors gathering to walk and play and connect, the moment we close a public street, we're changing how that public infrastructure operates. That shift brings real safety and legal considerations, and we want to have a plan for those with the same care that we give to any public event. Our permit process is how we do that. So when we talk about supporting open streets, we're talking about supporting these lively, people-centered outdoor events that create vibrancy, equity, and access to public space. Next slide, please. This slide we've added as a representation of our outdoor special event economy. It includes a variety of events, but I'll point out that the event on the lower left-hand side, the picture of the two children with the yellow star, and the photo just above that in front of Urban Outfitters is from one of the City of Asheville's open streets events. We also have a picture of Downtown After 5 here on an open street. We have the Mardi Gras parade on the lower right-hand corner on an open street. And so we can see that open streets really can be a concept that is very limited, or it can be very inclusive. Next slide, please. Now here's what it takes to bring an outdoor special event to life like this in Asheville. First, applicants fill out a public space inquiry form to begin the conversation. Then they submit a full application with a fee and site plan and public notice. From there, our internal team made up of city departments and external stakeholders reviews the proposal. And if approved conditionally, the applicant moves forward by submitting insurance, safety plans, and any final documentation. Permits are issued about 48 hours before event setup. Throughout this entire process, our team provides one-on-one guidance to help producers navigate requirements and timelines. It's detailed, but it's designed to ensure safety, equity, and smooth operations. Next slide, please. Of course, permitting isn't all just about paperwork. It comes with costs. This chart shows typical fees for a permitted outdoor event. An organizer could pay over $1,200 in direct city-related costs before even booking entertainment or marketing their event. This includes application fees, permits, barricade rentals, insurance, transit impact fees, parking, and safety services like law enforcement and fire. The first row of this chart, required permits, shows the base permit costs for the most simplistic event, street closure. The second row, required devices, shows the required elements needed to implement the closure. And the third row, these are variable fees that may apply based on the selected street, as well as other optional elements. For nonprofits, we offer reduced rates on some permits, but even then, the expenses add up quickly. Understanding this helps us see why support, both financial and logistical, are so essential if we want to see more equitable and accessible open streets events. Next slide, please. As of now, total event activity in 2025 is tracking about 11% lower than in 2024. We feel this decline is largely attributed to a few key factors. We have ongoing impacts to our riverfront properties, which have seen reduced use due to access and recovery challenges, a noticeable dip in the frequency of recurring events, especially smaller or community-driven programs, and fairly significantly, we had a discontinuation of a weekly art market, which had previously contributed consistent event counts throughout the year. We had a market on Friday nights in Pack Square that did not choose to return this year. That said, we're seeing promising signs for the remainder of the year. August through October is shaping up to be a strong season with several large events scheduled and new interest from community partners. So while overall numbers are slightly down, momentum appears to be building as we move into the fall. Next slide, please. Asheville offers several support mechanisms to reduce barriers to help make public events possible, especially for nonprofits and community-focused celebrations. First, we have event production contracts for key holidays throughout the year. These are formal agreements with trusted partners to deliver major city-supported events like the MLK Peace March, the Juneteenth celebration, Independence Day Block Party, and the Holiday Parade. Outside of these signature events, we also provide a 75% nonprofit discount available year-round. This discount applies to permits and property use fees, but doesn't cover things like application fees, alcohol permits, transit impact, traffic signs, parking, or public safety staffing. To help fill the gap, we offer an annual event support grant, which can reimburse the remaining 25% of eligible costs, along with full reimbursement for the application fee, alcohol, parking, and transit impact fees. I will point out that the parking budget is limited. That is a special program that we have to allocate those funds in a special separate way outside of the general fund. But this program is open to nonprofit organizations producing free public events on city property, and it's a valuable tool for reducing financial barriers for community-oriented programming. We're also exploring ways to make support more nimble. Under consideration is a rolling mini grant program, potentially offered monthly or quarterly through Arts ABL. This would help address emerging needs more quickly and equitably. Taken together, these programs are an essential part of how the city supports safe, inclusive, and vibrant public events. Next slide, please. I have to share this because we are in the midst of looking at all of our public safety guidelines. We have an internal task force developed to look at how we make people safe at our events. So as we continue to grow these offerings, public safety does remain our top priority. We're consistently evaluating how to strike the right balance between keeping people safe and making it easy and enjoyable to host events. Some of the deterrents we've used for events and roadways include meridian barriers, Jersey barricades, and even dump trucks. But relying solely on law enforcement capacity alone is no longer a sustainable option. Volunteer staffing at barricades, while helpful, can be unreliable too. To better guide our decisions, we've developed a standardized worksheet that helps evaluate public safety requirements, whether that's police, fire, EMS, emergency access routes, or traffic control plans. And over time, this data will allow us to identify recurring hotspots, areas where safety infrastructure is regularly requested or custom setups are always needed. With that information on hand, we can begin to prioritize permanent safety upgrades, things like retractable bollards, hardened intersections, or curb extensions to create more event-ready streets. We're also exploring the idea of designated certain downtown streets as preferred closure zones. That would allow us to concentrate security efforts and better support organizers in high-demand areas. Of course, all of this needs to be weighted against one of our biggest concerns, the financial burden on event organizers. We're working to ensure that safety improvements don't unintentionally create new barriers to community celebrations. That concludes my portion of this presentation. I'm standing by for questions.
Thanks, John. Councilwoman Roney?
Thank you, John. As a participant in the open streets twice on Wall Street and once when the city closed around Pritchard Park, one of the things that came up is that because we haven't yet decriminalized all modes of transportation, that people were able to walk and bike, but they weren't actually allowed to skate. So I am excited that we're considering decriminalizing micromobility. But one of the things that's been coming up in the conversations in community that I'm hearing is folks are saying, well, wait, how about before social district, can we make open streets easier first? And so my curiosity has included national and statewide trends in alcohol consumption being down, the ULI recommendations on making this a great place to live and work, which would in turn be a great place to visit, and a lot of concern about making our streets safer. But my question for staff today start with Sundays. So my understanding is that if you wanted to have an open streets event on a Sunday, you would still have to pay to have the parking spaces closed, even though we don't charge for metered parking on Sunday. Is that still the case that we charge for that?
That is correct. And I should probably ask someone from parking services to comment about that. It's not an outdoor special event fee.
Okay. That would help to know, because I think folks are like, well, we would do more of open events on Sundays and activate our downtown businesses like on Wall Street, like during the holiday event that we heard about and enjoyed last year. But another element would be, let's see, I have this written down. Oh, are the open streets available or eligible for micro grants? The grants you were talking about.
Yes, that would be a public event, free to the public, presumably on a public property. That would absolutely be qualifying as long as the organization applying is a nonprofit.
Okay, so that's why I was hoping and I appreciate talking about this, not in a silo, but as like the on-ramp as part of activating our streets with more people, whether it's making our streets open and inclusive. I saw some of the pictures of events like the Laugh Festival and the open streets. And I know there were a lot of barriers for the community trying to put those events together. There's a lot of costs involved. So like what I'm hearing in general is, can the city work towards making it easier for our downtown neighborhoods and businesses to have open streets before the social district to see if that's actually the better tool to use?
Could you define easier?
I think it's possible not enough people know that the open streets is an option or that there are grants available. The parking on Sunday seems to be another barrier that was coming up. Folks are like, oh, it'd be so much easier on a Sunday when you have less traffic, except for we have all these fees to pay for closing the parking spaces.
No problem. We will get on it.
Sage?
Well, were we going to throw our new Sabrina under the bus on that one with the parking on Sundays? She probably has no idea. But Sabrina, did you want to speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, I can speak to that. So currently, the fees are established so that we charge for metered and non-metered space closure. So it's $25 per day per space, regardless of whether there is a fee normally charged for that space. I think part of the rationale maybe for doing so as well would be, even if we're not making revenue that's benefiting parking services directly, that there is still a value of the use of that space to residents, visitors, businesses, and by taking a space out of service, it does have impacts to access to those locations.
Thank you. So I guess it comes down to like, what is our goal here? Because if we're trying to make it easier to host events right now, we might have to act differently than we've been doing the last few years, because I am not surprised to hear that we've seen a dip in smaller events. And I don't say that because of Helene. I say that because when we increased the fees last time around, the smaller events came to us and said that will make it so we can't do it. So there's some of that in there. So if the goal here is to like really kind of do like a post-Helene boost of economic activity, then we should probably look at fixing the Sunday issue with parking. We should probably look at making it easier to have these events and simpler and maybe cheaper. I understand we'd have to find the money, but we should probably talk about it. And then, John, I'm curious, there was a lot of preparation, and I appreciate that detail because safety and all those things, but how long does it take from what's the minimum time commitment from putting in an application to the date of the event? Is it like several months or?
So this year we've really been loose with our timelines just because of what everyone's been going through. But typically our standard, we have the first is the inquiry form. We let that sit for 2 weeks to make sure that there's no problems with the request before we invite people to fill out an application. And then the application deadline is 6 weeks in advance. For an open streets event or a smaller type of event would be 6 weeks in advance. So 2 weeks for the inquiry to process and 6 weeks for the application to be complete.
So a couple months. Okay.
And
if we had to, could we speed it up?
Yes, we can be faster, but I will say
on a temporary basis.
Yeah, I will say we can move faster, especially right now because we have been moving faster.
Okay.
But the challenge often is that we're not able to issue the permits, not because the city isn't prepared, but because the events are not prepared with the things that they need to complete their application. So hopefully we can provide some more guidance to the community to help them stay on track and make sure that they have all that stuff in place. And we could probably get these permits approved in 3 to 4 weeks.
That's great. And John, do you personally, like if the MODA, I can't remember if it's Merchants of Downtown Asheville, I think MODA, they're the ones kind of organizing around like a retail pedestrian only Wall Street idea. Do you sit with groups like that and kind of walk them through it?
Sure. I mean, I just met with someone from the Downtown Association today and we walked down Wall Street and we scoped it out and looked at the spaces and kind of thought about what could work. Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. I love that. I know you've been with us a long time, so you have the background. Okay, that's it for me. I'm excited about these ideas.
Thanks, Sage. And I'm seeing Google Meets has now numbered whose hand goes up first, which is a joy. Thank you, Google Meets. Ben?
Yeah, I'll just say this real quickly. And Councilwoman Turner, you actually said this in your comment. I just want to restate it because this will apply to one of our other topics today. Activating downtown and the rest of the city is critically important. I'll note, if we do things that reduce revenue, council, you will need find ways to replace that revenue. So I just want, we're in a financial situation that requires that these days. I won't say it again. I just wanted to say it once. Thank you.
Yeah, sales tax is my hope.
Yeah, Kim?
So when we consider these two, the social districts and the open streets, I'm not hearing pushback about open streets. I'm hearing a lot of enthusiastic support, which means less concerns, engagement, capacity issues. So with this, I would love to see us move this quickly to council. But it would also help to know like how much is available in the micro grant funds. Are we going to fix the Sunday parking issue? And where's our action on micro mobility so that the street closures benefit everyone and everyone's able to use the street?
Yes, similarly, I definitely have some interest in this one. I mean, you've probably heard me say before, if you look at the amount of public land, the amount of it that is in roadways compared to parks or libraries or spaces that we use just kills me because it's just for one user. And having our people in our streets, in our downtown, and celebrating being together and a place for us to come as locals is really important to me. And I hadn't necessarily been thinking about it as either or, as I'm hearing you think of it, Kim. When I do think about that, though, there's some real distinctions between open streets and social districts. Social districts looks like it wouldn't cost the city anything because the event applicant would be paying, whereas open streets would have a cost for us. So that's a really different thing. The other thing is with social districts, it would change who gets the financial benefit, right? Because right now the event planner is the one buying the alcohol from ABC directly and then having volunteers distribute it. But with social districts, service workers would be getting the tips. The businesses would actually be selling the alcohol. So there's like a direct thing that we could measure of, is that money going into the direct economy of the businesses and the workers that are losing shifts? Whereas with the open streets, there's a risk that we're just adding additional subsidy to the nonprofits who are going to host these events anyhow. And so how does that work? Is it like, are we just giving more money to the people who happen to be in producing events activities here? Or is it really actually stimulating new events? That would be the interest to me, is the design to make sure that it's that we're getting more events because people have dropped out. But in the way this is structured, by just giving more money out, I don't know that it would guarantee that. The risk is that we're just kind of throwing more money. And I'm thankful, and I'm sure those nonprofits would be like, yes, please, we're struggling. But it gets back to what you said, Sage, like, what is the goal we're getting here? And so I'm interested in talking about open streets more and really starting to potentially quantify. But I don't see these two as an either or. I think there's a both and conversation I'm curious about, because I think that we could see more workers having more shifts, having higher tips per shift, more alcohol sales to those restaurants, more food sales to those restaurants by a social district during events than simply street closures. Did you want to jump in, Kim?
Sure. I think I just want to re-elevate, because I haven't heard it named as part of the ecosystem, but downtown is a neighborhood where people live. And when we're talking about noise complaints and folks wanting to have more types of noise variants, we will hear more from the neighbors. So that's part of why I'm like, can we, I guess this would be like in a sequence, put open streets and pushing that first to see where our capacity is, not just for our own staff, not just how it helps businesses to recover, but also what is the capacity for the neighborhood. I still have questions about our local ABC staff capacity. I know Belshire was a much bigger event, but my understanding is like 40 people from outside of our community had to be brought in to handle that capacity. So I would just want to know, while staffing levels are down, like, what's our plan for enforcement?
I wonder, so I hear on the staging idea, I guess a question I have is, well, now I'm kind of like jumping ahead, but given those three options we've been talking about, of like, just let this die right now, keep it in committee for a while, which could be forever, or move it towards council. If we're looking at these two as a bundle, which might have sequencing or might not, I'd be interested in bundling these two to move towards council. Curious if looking at that together, if there's support for that.
I'm happy to support that. I think we got to take some moves. We got to make some moves.
In that case, I would suggest decoupling them, because I can't advance the social districts at this time with the missing information and with the amount of engagement we've heard a strong no about.
Okay. Well, we can kind of, there's several other topics. I'm hearing 3 folks interested in moving open streets to council, and 2 folks interested in moving social districts to council. So let's keep moving. on to the other topics. Thanks so much for all the discussion so far from staff and the presentation so far. Let's go to the other three topics.
Good afternoon, Jessica Morris, Assistant Director of Transportation. I'm gonna talk a little bit about the parking side of this, and I'll just start off by saying, I think for us, open streets is just another type of event. So it's not, it's the same permitting process. It's the same concept that we would review. And so the parking side of it and the parking questions would apply to whether we were talking about social districts or open streets or any other type of event that might have an interest in closing parking. This slide here is just a summary of what our current parking fees are. And yes, we do charge for both non-metered and metered parking space closures. That's for an event or a construction project or what have you. We don't have a nonprofit discount or any of that. It's just if you're closing a parking space, then we currently charge for that. And we have the same concept for loading zones, ADA spaces, etc. Our on-street meter fees are $2.50 an hour. That was an increase from a couple of years ago that the council passed. And then our garage fees, and this is Monday through Sunday. So we still charge fees for garage uses on Sundays, although we don't charge for meters on Sundays. But it's $2 an hour. And then if you're there for less than 1 hour, it is free. We recently lowered the daily maximum from 25 to 15. So that's just a rundown of our current parking fees. Next slide, please. So these were the three things that we were asked to take a look at: creating a voucher program, reducing or waiving closure fees for certain events, and then to look at the concept of possibly charging for meter use on Sundays, but making our free day either Monday or Tuesday. So we'll go through those three things. Next slide. So firstly, we do have a voucher program already in place. So we have the ability to do a 15% discount to any customer, whether they're a nonprofit or a business or a private citizen. If you purchase over $300 or 300 validations, we do a bulk discount for that. We cannot, and this is where the legal side comes in, we can't give discounts or fee waivers to certain groups or certain events. It has to be fairly applied to everyone. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And this is because we're an enterprise fund. So we have some different rules than like with the general fund. We have a lot more legal restrictions on how we take in money and how we spend money. Next slide, please. So again, so we do have a voucher program already. They can purchase these prepaid parking validations for any number of hours that they would like to have it in a city-owned parking garage, and it's a 15% bulk discount. So we can't provide free or discounted validations to specific groups. If we were to do so, then there would have to be another revenue source that offsets that discount or waiver. So these businesses, organizations, whoever wants to purchase these validations, they can purchase them from us, and then they can distribute it with whatever marketing initiative they may want to. So, a business could decide on their own, if you spend $50 or more in the store, we can give you one of our validations. Next slide. So the second consideration was looking at reducing or waiving parking space closure fees. So we, like I said, we can only do it as equitable and just kind of blanket across the board. So the idea of saying we're not going to charge any fees for any event if it's on a Sunday or a Monday or what have you, we can do that. We can make that decision at the council level because we're not choosing a group or event. So we would have to say, like, anybody who applies for a parking space closure on a Sunday gets it free, whether it's an event or a construction project or any kind of use. That's the key for us, is that we can't just say specific things. So for us, that is something that we can absolutely look at and bring to the council as a decision, whether if we want to say we're not going to charge any fees for closures on a certain day, we can do that. We could do it on very specific days. Like if you said you were going to do social districts on 4 days a year, we could say those 4 days a year, we won't charge anybody any closure fees. The key is just that it has to be available to everyone equally. So, one of the downsides for us in considering just blanket waivers is that there's no like incentive for event organizers or construction projects, for example, to limit the amount of space they're taking out of service if there's not any fee. So that's just one of the considerations to think about. Next slide, please. So this third one is something that I think we would need to do a little bit more research on. We have occupancy data, like really strong occupancy data from our garages. We don't have a mechanism for looking at occupancy of parking meters because they don't have sensors in them to tell you like when a space is turned over. And so we don't know, without going out there and doing count of occupancy of parking meters, like how often those turn over. But I think that anecdotally, and looking at some of our garage occupancy numbers, which are in slides in this presentation for you to look at later if you'd like, we do see that there is a potential, there could be a potential benefit to switching Sundays to a Monday or Tuesday. Demand on Sundays based on our garage occupancy is pretty strong. And so, switching and not charging for meters on a Monday or a Tuesday and instead doing it on a Sunday could result in some increased revenue for parking. And it could be something that entices more demand on a Monday or a Tuesday. So that's something that we could test. The one thing that could happen, but we wouldn't.
Sorry, could you say that again? I got lost in a little bit of it, but I think you were saying that there's a financial win, but could you just rewind a teensy bit for me?
Yeah, so we based on our garage data, we see that Sundays has strong demand, actually maybe a little bit higher than our Monday or Tuesday in our garages. And so the concept of not charging for meters on Monday or Tuesday instead of not charging for Sunday, if we started charging on Sundays, we could see higher revenue from our meters because there seems to be a higher demand in our garages on Sundays. And it could, on a Monday or Tuesday, potentially entice more people to come downtown if we weren't charging on a Monday or Tuesday. However, one of the things that could happen is that commuters, employees, they could take up all the parking spaces on Monday on the free day, and then it's not really creating that turnover or enticing people to downtown. But that's something that, like you've been saying, that's something that we could test. We would have to figure out how to staff that. Right now, we don't have people working on a Sunday, so that's a consideration. But I do think that it's something that we could look at if the council wanted us to do so. And the other slides are basically just some of the garage occupancy numbers that we have Monday through Sunday. And it's just for this past month of June. So, take it how you will, but I mean, I think it kind of matches up with what you would anecdotally see is that our Thursday, Friday, Saturdays are busiest. But we do get, pretty close to a full threshold on our other days as well. Councilwoman Turner?
I love it. And I get that the Monday might mean workers take up spaces, but to me, that's helping the workers with something they've been complaining about for a long time too. The cost of parking. So it's kind of another side perk. I don't know that this works forever, but in this economic boom kind of activity, it could work really well. I'm really glad to see that up there.
Yeah.
I wanted to comment on the voucher idea because I think, and this might be, I guess, just previous, Kim was there. I think we used to have a parking committee with the department head, but now Sabrina, and talked just about parking. And the city of Asheville partnered with Asheville Grown, and we allocated $3,000 in actual physical paper vouchers to get into the decks, and then gave them to local businesses to hand out, like you said. And it was a small thing, like $3,000. Council had to approve it, but it worked, and then I think the nonprofits stamped them and gave them out, and it was really, it helped. And I think that idea is wonderful as well. It was successful in the past. It got that tie. You went into the business, if we did it with the special events, it could be at the wristband table, just, it's wonderful. I'm glad to see this kind of stuff. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
Jessica, were there any more slides you wanted to go through, or should I open up for general question and discussion?
I think we can just open it up to general questions.
Thanks. I am really curious about if there's something we could do that really does help workers parking downtown and bring people down, bring locals downtown when we aren't. So I like seeing these options. I also wonder if instead of executing any of these right now, we ask staff to pursue that type of goal of like supporting reducing parking costs for workers in our budget process, which would probably take more analysis and more time than right now. Maybe I'm reading these and getting bogged down, but these suggestions seems like they might be a longer process to work through and make sure that we're not making a hasty financial decision. Like the idea of charging on Sundays, but then we don't have people working on Sundays. So then we can't just give them Mondays off because they have to be there for like, there's a bit more to think through operationally. But I'm really curious about the goal of like reducing parking burden for locals in the most legal way we can and reducing parking burden for workers. But wondering if like wrapping that into the process when we look at parking fees during the budget process could give us a more thorough analysis. And then by spring, we're looking at that. But I'm open to one of my colleagues being like, you're overthinking this. This part of it's going to be really clear. And then we could jump on it. But that's some of my reactions. Kim?
So I appreciate the lens on supporting the workers. I also think we're looking at things that we can kind of expedite, right, this fall. So we have 2 of our local decks are closed right now, and we're talking about putting a skating rink in another one. So I'm wondering, does this actually need to come back to committee with more information? I will also add that I get a lot of questions about why we haven't expanded the meters. If we are going to look at other areas of parking across the city so the burden isn't only on downtown, and looking for ways to increase our revenue so we can invest in our infrastructure. I know I'm not the only one hearing about that. But it does seem to me that the vouchers are where it's at, especially because we increased the per hour rate for meters, hoping that more of the locals would move towards the decks. And we still have the county's reduced $40 a month passes for workers downtown that isn't fully utilized. So just in this public space, a reminder, if you know someone who works downtown and they're paying out the wazoo for parking, look up Buncombe County parking pass discounts and you'll find the link to apply.
Right. Just a couple things. So we are planning to move forward with meter expansion and monthly on-street permits in the South Slope. We did not bring that forward this FY26 because there was a desire not to bring forward any additional fees or anything due to Helene and recovery. So that is something that we are working on. Our intention is to, when the Cox Avenue project gets done, that we're more or less simultaneously implementing parking meters and additional monthly permit options in the South Slope together. We do, Sabrina and I have been talking a lot about opportunities to help the downtown workforce. You know, it is tricky legally to do that. And I think one of the best ways that we can do that is just provide more monthly permit parking options. And so that's something that we can bring forward either within the fee process of the budget or separately. But that's something that we would like to do. You know, there are all kinds of things that we can do with fees. We could have different meter fees in different locations that are lower demand that would maybe better suit downtown workers that are, you know, farther outside of the core of downtown. There's a lot of opportunity, and we can certainly continue to work on that and bring forward some more, I guess, comprehensive options for you during the budget process. But we could also, you know, some of the quick things we could do are, you know, with this open streets or events issue, we can talk about that. That's something that can be done more quickly. The Sunday versus Monday thing is a little bit more complicated just from the staffing and like the stickers on the meters and things like that, but it's not out of the realm of possibility for being done in, you know, a relatively small amount of time.
So to my colleagues on council, I'm hearing a real interest in exploring what we can do to reduce the burden on parking for workers, as well as encourage locals to come downtown during times that they may not be. And that maybe we want to have another conversation in committee about this to just get into some of the details more comprehensively. Am I picking up what's being put down? Or here, I didn't hear a specific, like, I'm ready for this to move forward, or I hate this part of it. So let's I'll open a broader question. Like, what are we thinking about this, and what type of direction are we thinking for staff on this? I think I have more questions to understand the vouchers, what the incentives are, how this goes together personally, that I wouldn't mind having a focused discussion on this in the future as a committee. But what are y'all thinking?
I agree. It would help me to know, is the voucher concept currently accessible? Like, could a group of businesses buy a book of tickets today?
Yes.
Okay, I don't think that that's as publicly aware as we might imagine.
Right. I do think that one of our opportunities is and has been to better advertise our offerings.
For example, I know you can buy bus passes for your staff too if you've got a lot of folks that are using transit, and we have, you know, a program for that. But in a case where a group of, let's say, retail establishments or restaurants wanted to buy vouchers, they could, and I don't think folks know that. So I'd like some more information, and also, as we're bringing more information to this committee, information on that so we can get it out to the public.
Okay. I'll chime in a little. I love some of the short-term options. I think vouchers for events and stuff ties with some of what we're talking about, trying to do social districts or walking district, whatever, open streets. But I also love the Sunday, Monday thing, but just from my experience with the parking department and the staffing and stuff, I feel like that's a probably next budget cycle or something. I don't know. But it just seems like a bigger need to rearrange all your staff and schedules. But if you thought it was possible, I would certainly love to hear more about it. I also think, Kim just mentioned the bus, and maybe we have like you get the employer or the event host can buy a slew of discounted bus passes at a pickup spot. Like how do we get people in groups on the bus instead of in our decks too? There's just options, but some of that could be short term. Some of that could be this fall, which could be, October has historically been our busiest time of the year. And it may be again, could be if we take some steps now.
All right, we still have 1 or 2 more to go. So I think in summary, this was like lots of us discussing. There's curiosity. I don't know exactly what all of the questions are, but let's bring this back to have more conversation that gets into the detail of the various options, the voucher, the Sunday, Monday, and not sure what that means of like, let's get into more discussion on it as a committee. Great, good talk. Okay, let's keep going. Thanks, Jessica.
All right, and I am back to talk about food trucks. So just want to clarify what is allowed now within downtown for food trucks. Food trucks are allowed on sites downtown if they go through a development review process and are permitted for food trucks specifically. So they have to meet site compliance. It's a property has to be permitted in that way. 68 Haywood, for example, was permitted in that way several years ago. Temporary food truck uses are allowed as part of outdoor special events within downtown, but they're actually not allowed on private property in the same way that they are in most other districts. So in most other districts, you can have food trucks set up through our temporary use permit process. Within Biltmore Village and in the Central Business District, that it is not allowed. So it's a unique situation for these two districts. Another layer is that freestanding gasoline generators are prohibited within the fire district, which is generally aligns with our downtown core. Some food trucks are equipped with onboard generators, others aren't. We do have some electrical hookup capabilities in some areas of downtown, although those are somewhat limited. So just wanted to add this layer to the picture. Next slide, please. And because there are these different kind of layers, and I think some good ideas have been talked about over time related to food trucks during times when restaurants are closed or during in areas that maybe aren't otherwise very active. We are doing a survey with mobile food vendors to understand, number one, their interest, number two, like what their, barriers might be to vending downtown, whether that's equipment, whether that's, what days of the week, what times of day. So we have that survey open now, and we do have some early feedback, which I can come circle back to, but also laid out just what this kind of looks like from a policy consideration standpoint. So the opportunity could definitely be there to go back and look at the ordinance and make some changes to what those restrictions are. There could be a series of pilot events, particularly because food trucks are allowed to operate within downtown in the context of an outdoor special event. And we've been talking with Marcus and our business inclusion office about some different ideas for something like that. We also could look to investing in more supportive infrastructure, upgrading the electrical panels to better support food trucks in certain areas like Pack Square. But yeah, gaining a better understanding of what some of these barriers are, what some of these needs are, we thought could help better position whatever happens, for success. some of the early feedback we've heard is that there is interest from vendors in vending downtown, lunch and dinner hours being the most preferred. Access to electricity is a need for about a quarter of the respondents we heard from, along with restrooms, trash disposal, and water. 60% of the businesses of the vendors we heard from are MWBE businesses. There's some concerns about parking and loading, related to setup, and some issues, some concerns about safety. Vendors also generally want to be located in areas where there is already good pedestrian foot traffic. So just some early insights there, and this is what we have to share on this topic.
Thanks so much, Dana. With the pilot idea, like a series of special events, and you sharing kind of some of the demographic of some of the vendors that you've been engaging with, are you saying here that the business inclusion office might be able to coordinate some of, or what would our role be in if we wanted to lean into option B?
I think that's a great question. I think that there's absolutely an opportunity for coordination and outreach through our business inclusion office. I know in the past, the city tried to orchestrate a food truck lot at 68 Haywood Street. There was some success in that. Ultimately, it didn't end up proving to be successful. And part of that might be because there wasn't more of a marketing kind of organized initiative around food truck Fridays. And here, the city we don't have event producers on staff. So we did test the waters with that. That was several years ago now. And I think our ability to kind of, ensure success is somewhat constrained, and that private partners would be really important, but I don't know what that would look like exactly. I think that in terms of outreach and engagement with vendors, we would love to be able to support that.
So if we went towards a B, it wouldn't necessarily be city staff saying, we're going to go host an event and get trucks to sign up. It would be more us saying, through the relationships we have and the survey you're doing now, saying, hey, if all of y'all want to kind of band together and do something, we can kind of coach the process. That's interesting, because that could really test demand. It could also test kind of like the operational process for these trucks who might not be doing stuff downtown. I see. Oh, I love Google. Kim, your hand was up first. After you.
Thank you, Dana. So one of the things that I'm hearing the most is not actually lunch and dinner requests, is actually late night food service, which wouldn't compete with the local businesses downtown. But the original request that we were hearing a few years back was the area that we currently allowed to be closed off for festivals in front of the Merrill Lynch building across from like where the noodle shop is. So if you aren't hearing those same concerns or from the same people that I'm hearing from, it would be so helpful to have the link if you're using a link to do that targeted outreach. And I would certainly like to hear the outcomes of that survey, maybe at this committee in the future.
Thanks. The survey is for the vendors themselves, but we'll make sure you have it. Thanks.
I want to pump us up a little bit more on food trucks, and I want to speak from my history with it, because it used to be different, and we got a little more regulatory about it. I don't know how many years, 5, 6, 7 years ago, when we decided the electrical setup needed to be this approved set. It was fairly expensive. It was $3,500 a time at the time, and then you had a location in downtown. I think we have 2 now, maybe 3, but it used to be like, I'll use my property managed downtown at the co-op as an example. Whoever had Little B Tie, oh my goodness, they were so good. Every Wednesday for probably near a decade, they parked in the co-op parking lot and served a line of people out the door, and they plugged their 30 amp truck into our building, and it was permitted, it was allowed. We, drew a map where the electrical line was taped and stuff, and it prompted them to open a restaurant. It was so popular. So it was economic development at its core. It also activated an end of downtown at the time that wasn't very busy. So yes, we can put them in the busiest places, but we can also let other places that maybe say just sell alcohol host a food truck. We can do more. We used to do more. And as a fun example, I used to also have a permit for a clay oven that was on a vehicle trailer. So pictures of it that is like 6x10 clay oven, open burning clay oven in downtown every Wednesday. Smoke, special fire extinguishers, everything, the smell of fresh bread infused downtown every Wednesday. And I feel like we should, instead of being like the safest, like most regulated, we should be looking at this kind of stuff, in my opinion. I feel like the food trucks could be better. And the late night comment is so true. If, we're talking a little bit earlier about social districts and we don't want to just be moving on alcohol based things. But if you are in downtown Asheville at night, the only things open are bars and restaurants. And their shopping closes, everything and then the restaurants are closing earlier. So you have a bar. And if we want more things than just drinking, we need this kind of activation, but not just in pockets. It failed at 68 Haywood. Sure, let's try it again, but it didn't thrive there, So just a little bit on that. I feel like we've gotten too regulatory on it.
It does make me think too, like some of the lessons. I think sometimes we see failure as an end point, and it's like, well, what do we learn? And then let's use it. And so I think, if we would lean in a direction of moving a concept forward towards council with looking at a pilot food truck event where we're kind of encouraging and coordinating, maybe it's also in coordination with the Civic Center when we know we're going to have 8,000 people downtown for a big event. Like, what if we coordinate it where after the next widespread panic, we have this really awesome food truck rally at the same night and then see how that goes. So we don't necessarily go into changing all the code. But that there's some cohesion with some idea to test and try it out, because we did learn last time that the time and the place and the location wasn't glitching, or it was glitching. So I'd be curious Kim, go for it. So that's
I just have one more thing. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt. I just want to finish the thought. The other, we did learn with those pilot food truck events that nearby retail stores stayed open later for the pilot night, right? So there's more economic activity, sales tax, et cetera. But the other thing I did want to mention about generators is that now generators have changed. They've evolved. We could allow inverters. They're quiet. They sit outside. They don't exhaust the same way that generators, because we canceled the generators because of the noise. It wasn't a safety issue. It was loud. They're loud. But now we have newer technology. So that's it. Go ahead, Kim.
Everyone has generators after Halloween. Not everybody, but anyhow. So yeah, I'll just say, like, I'd toss that friendly option out of maybe council or maybe commission. We move testing a pilot that coincides with some other events around food trucks. Curious about feedback. And Kim, your hand's been up. Thanks for being patient as I get excited and keep talking.
So the one thing I would add about the Civic Center is I thought the plan for the park at the Pit of Opportunity was going to include spaces for food trucks and vendors. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel on that. We should just, move forward with community engaged plans because we don't have to start community engagement from the beginning. But I could imagine supporting B with the pilots if we are looking at that. The request we heard originally was 10 to 2. And that's not just for, people who are visiting, but also people who are getting off of work.
Mm-hmm. Dana?
Just wanted to note that there is a pilot program happening now to activate 68 Haywood Street. So we're happy to report back the various things that are going on outside of what's included on these slides today. But just thank you.
Great. So keep me in check, colleagues on council. I think I'm hearing consensus, but point out if I'm not, that we're interested in adding to the list that moves to council a special event pilot that's late night, commingled with when there's other big activations happening, and getting more information about that for all of council to consider.
And fewer regulations that allow more types of food trucks to participate. There are different power setups on these trucks. If ABI looks at that, they'll find that. But our rules restrict half the food trucks that are out there.
All right. I think we got one more in the suite. Good job. Keep them coming.
All right, good afternoon, y'all. First of all, we're going to talk about noise. Sorry, it's been an hour and a half of a lot of content, so we need a little relief. Yeah, so we got a couple of things that are, I say two simultaneous considerations. Maybe it's two simultaneous conversations, right? We've got a couple of items that I just want to touch on today or this afternoon that are kind of run in parallel. They're not necessarily connected to each other though. And the first one is the modification of the level 3 sound exceedance regulations that are currently at 30, and the conversation is more than 30, right? And so then the other item that we want to have as part of the conversation is our current commercial noise ordinance. Are they striking the proper balance with the community? Right, and so that's kind of a side conversation. There's some stimulus that's bringing that up, but we're going to touch on both of those. So next slide, please. So we'll start with the level 3 sound exceedance. Currently within our ordinance, the maximum days of event is the technical terminology is 30. And a word that's come up quite a bit during today's conversation is pilot program. So let's look at the pilot program concept. So something could be created by, let's say, a pilot test program. First of all, establishing a sunset date, right? Do we want run a test? We want a pilot that's going to go for X amount of months, and whether it's the end of the year, whether it's March or whatever. So pick up a sunset date. And then basically identify that it's in everybody's interest that we're going to approve a modification to the current ordinance, which is 10-88 2C, for the number greater than 30. And that would sunset on that established date. And then following the sunset, then maybe do an evaluation of that change, right? And I say maybe do, and that the way I see that, there's a lot of momentum from local organizations who are in favor or affected by this, who have run some numbers already. And maybe at the end of this pilot program, they can summarize kind of what's the effect, what the benefits was of that. I don't know that there's a specific format or platform for that, but I think that's the whole point behind the pilot program, right? Is to put something together and see if it'll work and evaluate it and summarize whether it did, and then that makes the decision moving forward hopefully easier. And so next slide, please. Then the other item is are we striking the current balance, right? We went through, and we've all talked about this many times. We've gone through quite some time to establish the current noise regulations that we have. And, we've evolved. Many things have happened since that day. And kind of the issue that is stimulating this conversation is there are music producing locations. There's bars, nightclubs, there's other people that are basically, or organizations, businesses, and they don't exceed the current regulations, but they're still generating complaints, right? And so at that point, I think that's where the conversation comes up is, are we striking the balance? And that's for a lot more people than just me to figure out, right? So that would take certainly some energy and some effort, both internally with staff, but primarily through the community, to kind of reactivate the conversations. And what I did is just listed a couple of bullet points here. These are just general ideas or general concepts. There could be a million more. Probably every one of these came up during our original outreach and conversations for the first round. And so right now, CBD, industrial, and commercial are all kind of connected within the ordinance. Maybe there's a reality where the CBD is a standalone, right? It lives in its own zone, and then it has its own criteria. The third one, just modify operational hours. So the county has something they call quiet hours. If you look into the wording, it's kind of subjective. It sounds a lot like our original one did, and so we've moved away from that with our current plan. But maybe that's instead of where we currently, maybe on the fourth bullet point there, modify the location of sound readings, right? Right now, we take it from the property line of where the complaint is coming from. Maybe if quiet hours were established during that period of time, you actually take it from the property line of the maker. And once again, there's probably a million different options. These are just some general ideas to throw out there. And then, Kate, if you move to the next slide, we've got one more slide, and I just want to do a zone. I just want to kind of overlay the concept, if there's any interest in that CBD concept. This is an idea of what that kind of surround looks like and what that boundary area looks like. And so Ben said, go as fast as you can. I could have gone a little faster, but I just wanted people to be able to understand what I was saying. And glad to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
That was super fast, Mark. You covered a lot of ground, lickety split. So first of all, as a professional in the music industry, I remember quite vividly that the neighborhood concerns around noise were not just music. The noise concerns from neighbors included traffic noise, like jack brakes, which are so intense on my nervous system, recycling and waste management, HVAC and exhaust issues. So with this one specifically, I don't have questions for staff, but for my colleagues here on where I'm at with moving this forward or not, I would suggest that we get an update from the Noise Advisory Board to this committee to understand how their process has been going since it's fairly new, what lessons have been learned, and what changes they might recommend, because we have a very delicate balance here. We have strong asks to increase from one business and concerns about another business. The Hatch event venue is evidently not happening the way it was being planned, but we'll have more than just music concerns.
I'll just say real quick, I mean, I'm hearing it from more than one entity. I am hearing it strongly from the one entity, but then I heard from another one, the South Slope, via email. So I don't know, and I don't know how widely it's broadcast, but so Mark, can you tell me something as fast as possible? I'll be quick. So at the beginning of this process, it was explained to me that if a venue was like well behaved and didn't have punitive kind of marks or have, been called out or punished for, whatever, breaking the noise ordinance rules or decibels, if they didn't have that history, that they could in fact have 50 events already. And that the concern for, I believe, this one venue, the one that's been loudest, was that they couldn't make plans for a big concert next year if this year's behavior could prevent that. Is that right?
Kind of. That's kind of right. Yeah. And so what happens here, you're mixing a couple of things up, and so the 30 is the maximum, right? And so that's the driving factor for a level 3 venue. And really, we only have one venue that meets the level 3 criteria. And the reason is there's additional measures that venue has to do, right? So they have to have their own internal monitoring. They have to have some sort of baffling, some sort of sound control. And there's just not many venues out there that have that capacity and that ability. And so that's what puts them into the level 3 capacity. And there are some lower level capacities. You mentioned the Hatch and that sort of thing. So if up and coming areas wanted to become bigger, then our team would look at basically what their past occurrence was to see if that would happen. But for the level 3 right now, that's the one that really has the designated number. And that one is set. So if they were to be in violation and they were to have like 2 or 3 events that did exceed that, That would be taken into consideration next year when they're applying for 30 events. And we would have to consider probably backing that off of that. And so if
Gotcha.
if
Okay.
they're good neighbors, then they can continue, but the 30 still is the maximum that's set up. in the
Okay.
ordinance.
That makes more sense. So if there's only one entity that is qualifying at this level 3, then we really are only talking about helping one business right now. The others could grow into it, but no one else is at that level in max.
Well, and I'll say that the framing of only helping one business is one business would be
Ready to move
activation,
now.
but it's an event activation strategy again that, you know, when you have people down to a show, the restaurants around it and the bars around it and all the servers and the bartenders, like all that kind of spills out because folks have more than one reason to come downtown.
This is the one where I was confusing it with another item earlier where it has about $400,000 in revenue in these surrounding it. So, yeah. And, you know, it would be helpful. Like, I do want to see this move forward as a pilot. I do think it could help. I don't think it needs to be forever, but I've said this in a previous meeting. We lost venues. We have, you know, whether it was by the river because of I-26 or now it got washed away, you know, we've lost locations. So there are more events that we could be having if there were more locations. So even on a temporary basis, I would like to see it move forward.
I would love to have that conversation at council of increasing the numbers in a pilot method. And then
Maybe we could get some data on how many noise ordinance issues came up. I mean, was it a huge problem? Were there thousands of concerns in downtown? I know we've had like some spot areas, one by Sly Grog, but you know, do we have a lot of input on these 30 events they're doing? Be helpful. If they're not problematic, let them
Yeah.
do it.
Kim?
I can support this going forward to the full council. I imagine because our agenda is set up where we don't have public comment at the beginning, that we probably have a lot of people waiting in the queue.
Great point. Okay, so I think I heard 3 of us interested in having this conversation at council as well. So there were a couple options that you laid out, Mark. I think the one with interest is increasing the number of above 30. So, all right, did that get us through the whole thing? Holy mackerel. There we go. So I'll wrap up. There's a key takeaway slide, but I'm going to use the power of the gavel to just say, you can read it on the screen or on your PowerPoint and kind of wrap us up. I do want to say, I know that it took a lot of work to pause other work plan items to prepare this deck. I mean, you can see from the amount of staff that are on this call that this is a lot of work to think through. I really appreciate all of our flexibility to say, let's not fester on perfect. Let's see. Looks like we have, you know, for my queue, we have a package, really a downtown reactivation package that we are recommending go to council. That doesn't mean everything's going to fly, but it also means staff can dig in a little bit more in the package or social districts, considering open street subsidy and costs, perhaps a late night food truck rally in commingled with a large event, and increasing the number of events from the noise ordinance. And I find that exciting. And then there's some stuff we want to talk about more, getting into parking and how we can support locals coming downtown and incentivizing that, and supporting workers is something we want to have continued discussion on. So I feel excited about the progress, excited to hear from our other colleagues on council and what their thoughts are. And then of course, out to the millions of people in the public watching. There's more for us to all hash through, but we'll get a little bit more dialed in and continue to have that public conversation. So thank you, everyone. Let's conclude this section. And then we have, I lost my agenda. We have item number 3 on our agenda is another juicy and super exciting topic to look at our CDBG-DR Small Business Support Program, where James is going to work with us. So take it away, James.
Good afternoon. I think this is my first time presenting to this council committee. I'm usually over in the HCD world, but it's really great to be with PED this afternoon. Again, I'm James Shelton. I'm the Community Development Division Manager here with the city. Happy to provide y'all with an update on where we are with our CDBG-DR program overall, but also specifically the Small Business Support Program. Next slide. Yeah, overview of CDBG-DR Small Business Support Program. Next slide. Thank you. So as a quick reminder for this committee and our community, we received a $225 million grant from HUD earlier this year. We went through an action planning process through this spring, and that action plan was submitted to HUD in April and approved by HUD in May. Since then, we have been developing the finer details for program implementation and rollout. We're in the process of finalizing some of those program details right now. Specifically, the one that we'll discuss today is the $17 million small business support program. It's going to be one of the first ones to launch. We are prioritizing this program because of community feedback that we heard and from council voicing their desire to want to see this program prioritized, as well as our infrastructure and planning programs as well. Those are the three that we'll see roll out sooner, but not so much sooner as the other programs. We do plan to implement all the programs within the next few months, but this one in particular will be rolling out and will include things like grants, loans, technical assistance, and architecture and engineering services for Asheville small businesses. And as part of getting ready for launching this program, we've partnered with the Asheville Chamber and Go Local to do some facilitated discussions to identify ongoing needs, gaps, and get some further ideas and insights from organizations and stakeholders in our community on what exactly a grant or a loan or TA should look like. We will receive a final report from our facilitators following these discussions. We are having the third tomorrow. We'll have a final one next week. We'll get a final report that is going to help to inform the final details of our program. And we expect to start rolling that out later this year. And I've got some fun updates for y'all here in a minute too. Next slide. So just a quick update on our timeline for CDBG DR. We've done a lot of work this year. Since January, as I mentioned, we went through this action planning process, and in April and May, we did get our action plan approved, and it's been policy summer over here in our department. You can say it's whatever kind of summer it is that Gen Zs, say that it is, but it's been policy summer here in our office. So we've been working on policy guidelines, procedures, program manuals, to get us to a point where we are getting certified from HUD for financial management and grant compliance. And we just last week received our certification for financial management and grant compliance, which means we have a grant agreement to be able to sign here at the city. We'll have the city manager sign that and be submitting that back to HUD for final grant execution. And what that means is that's the one of two steps to actually being able to implement programs. First step is getting the grant agreement executed. The second step is actually having all of those policies, procedures, and program manuals finalized and published online to our city webpage. Once those two things have happened, then we can start really rolling things out. So that's why we anticipate beginning project implementation this fall and into the winter. We're ready to go over the next couple of months. Just a quick update also that our first CDBG DR hire will be starting tomorrow. Our CDBG DR program manager will be starting tomorrow morning. We're super excited to bring her on board. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we've gone through this process for financial management and grant compliance certification. I won't spend too much time on this slide, but just to let y'all know, these are all the things that we've had to show HUD that we're ready to do, and we have clear policies and procedures for how we're going to do it. So anti-fraud, waste, and abuse policies, that's a new thing that we've had to write here at the city. We underwent a capacity assessment and staffing analysis. HUD actually conditioned our grant agreement on us bringing staff on. So we're well ahead of the game in that, and that we're already, we have job descriptions ready to go for 3 more positions that we're going to be rolling out over the next couple of weeks too. But these are all the policies that we've had to create, and we've worked closely with our federal partners to complete the certification process and get us to that grant agreement. Next slide. So aside from actual policies and procedures for our overall program, each of the individual programs like small business support has its own program manual for how we go about operating and making decisions. This is to make our decision-making clear and what our process looks like, but also to communicate to our community and the public and to you, council, what our decision-making structure looks like. So it allows us to have a transparent, fair, and efficient manner of establishing operations. So our small business support program manual is in its final stages, and we're going to be using those sessions we're doing with Go Local and the Chamber to inform that. Our infrastructure and planning manuals are also in the final stages of development. And these are some more policies here of how we're going to operate in terms of monitoring and compliance and auditing of our partners that we participate with. Next slide. So our small business support program falls within the economic revitalization bucket of our CDBG DR program. That bucket is a $52 million program. It represents about a quarter of our overall program, with, of course, infrastructure being the largest and housing coming in behind that. And just to remind y'all that we got to these numbers based upon the unmet needs assessment that we underwent back in the spring. And so following community feedback and some community input, we revised our original draft action plan, and we increased this economic revitalization bucket to be funding more support for small businesses. So next slide. These are the three programs within the economic revitalization bucket, and just want to touch again on what the other two are. Is that the revitalization of flooded commercial districts. That's a program that will provide funding for site development and improvements, flood proofing, arts and cultural support, and equipment investments in our flooded commercial district areas. This was something that the Urban Land Institute actually had some recommendations around how we may use those funds, with an idea of a RAD 2.0 to secure new facilities with affordable rents and resilient infrastructure. Again, that's just a recommendation they had, and that's something that we'll be taking into consideration as we move forward with implementing that program. The other one is the workforce development program that's going to address our need for skilled labor and specialized training. That's going to help us benefit by building our local talent for recovery and rebuilding efforts. And again, the Urban Land Institute recommended partnering with educational institutions, prioritizing enrollment in LMI communities, and building local capacity for green retrofits, green infrastructure, and climate resilience. So those are the other two programs. Let's hone in on small business support. Next slide, please. So we have a draft program manual right now. This has been in development over the last few months. We're putting the final touches on that and getting some really great feedback from our business community. Next slide. To help inform what exactly this program will do, but overall its purpose is to help revitalize our small business sector in response to the economic disruptions caused by Tropical Storm Helene. And several of our program goals for this program is, again, economic stabilization, prioritizing job creation and retention that benefits low to moderate income residents, rebuilding commercial corridors and infrastructure support, leveraging local partnerships, as well as ensuring strong oversight, fraud prevention, and compliance throughout the process of implementing this too. That's a priority for us here in our office. The Urban Land Institute also looked at this program, and with their recommendations, they came away saying that we could potentially use this program to build a creative incubator to nurture creative industries that reflect regional identity, partner with educational institutions and local nonprofits to develop business support services, and provide TA and marketing support. Next slide. So how does money actually get into the hands of a business? So we're right now at this number 2 section where we've got the grant agreement, right? HUD said they're going to give us the funds, but we don't actually get access to it until we can get certified and say we're going to be responsible stewards of this grant and have program manuals and policies and procedures that are transparent and clear and communicate that to our community of how we're going to operate this. With this program, we are going to work with subrecipient organizations, and those look like partner organizations that are 501c3 nonprofits or other local public agencies. Could also look like partnering with accredited public or nonprofit universities, community colleges, or technical institutions. We're casting a wide kind of spectrum here, so when we actually put out an application process or a notice of financial opportunity, we want to be able to get a good field of folks who can help us implement this. So through those subrecipient partners, they will then administer the funding to privately owned for-profit enterprises that meet the Small Business Administration size standards for its primary industry as defined by these NAICS codes, I'm not going to get into that, but the Small Business Administration by industry categorizes what is a small business, and we're going to abide by that. They must maintain a principal place of business within the city limits of Asheville and be independently owned and operated and not be dominant in its field of operation on a national basis. Next slide. So here's what's in our program manual. We'll talk about all of these 6 or 7 steps that you see here. And this is the timeline that it will take us to implement this program into the community and actually get awards to local businesses. So as we're developing and distributing a notice of financial opportunity to seek out those subrecipient partners, we're also going to need to provide TA sessions to them to actually educate potential partners on how this program operates and what are all the federal requirements around it. We'll then actually field applications and then review those, bring our recommendations to this committee for which partners we would propose we go with, and then finally take those proposed partners to council for final approval and authorization to enter into contracts. We would then develop and execute those subrecipient agreements or contracts. And in partnership with those subrecipients, they will in turn also have to have their own program manuals for how they operate. They can look at ours, but we need to review and approve those and help them implement these programs according to the federal requirements. Those subrecipients will then launch an application cycle for direct business assistance. We will be funding them, but then they will be the ones administering that directly to our small business community. We'll then reimburse them or work with them to process draw requests and payment. And then they will work to get the funding out to small businesses. That's the end of it. Next slide. So our delivery model, it is not where the city, as I mentioned, we're not going to be directly funding small businesses. We'll work with subrecipient partners through competitive NOFOs with a minimum award to those subrecipients of $250,000 and a maximum award of $10 million. And again, that's not to an individual business, that is to a partner organization to then pass that funding on to small businesses. That is not a maximum or minimum for what an individual business may expect to receive. Next slide. So again, these are just the requirements I mentioned about for potential subrecipient partner organizations, nonprofits, other local community development financial institutions, accredited nonprofit universities or technical institutions. And then they should all be, operating within the city limits of Asheville and demonstrate a history and experience of small business support or economic development. They need to be able to maintain financial and administrative systems, as well as conduct duplication of benefit analysis. That's a federal requirement that comes in during disaster recovery to ensure that any entity, be it an individual, a household, or a business, is not getting federal recovery dollars for the same activity 2 times. It's a Stafford Act requirement that we have to abide by. And they also have to be free of any unresolved federal audit findings or active debarment. We have some pretty clear requirements around not partnering with anyone who is flagged in the federal debarment system. Next. So who's not eligible to be a partner through this program are for-profit businesses receiving assistance under the program for their own benefit. Sole proprietors or individuals, political organizations, or religious institutions engaged in sectarian activities, or, as I mentioned, any entities listed in the federal system for awards management that has been suspended, debarred, or otherwise eligible. And again, I'm not talking about any specific small businesses that may not be eligible. This is just talking about partner organizations that will administer this on our behalf. Next. So what types of activities are we proposing with this program? Forgivable loans is a large one, where it will look like working capital loans for operational expenses, equipment or inventory replacement, and temporary lease assistance. We're also proposing a grant program with a lower award ceiling with a grant program that's also for working capital, and then technical assistance and architectural and engineering services. What you don't see here is construction. None of our proposed activities include construction type activities at this point. Now, we may hear from our community that says we really need construction support. What we have to abide by when you start getting into construction, and when you talk about our other CDBG DR funded programs, we're going to be doing construction like crazy. The administrative requirements as well as the federal cross-cutting requirements on construction is significantly higher and slows down the process. So you get into intensive environmental reviews, you get into Davis-Bacon wage requirements. There's several others that can potentially jam up the process. We're happy to do that. It just takes more time to implement, and it takes longer to get funding and support into business hands. One of the best practices that we've learned is to run a program that is for working capital that's not specifically to do construction or repair type work. This allows a business to fill those revenue gaps that they incurred as a result of the economic loss from the hurricane. Ineligible activities also include general government conduct or expenses or political activities. Any questions about that piece? I often get questions about the no construction thing.
I have a different question, but the slide helps. But it's really nice to just have you here, James. James has been doing all our affordable housing stuff, y'all, and just housing consortium. He's been wonderful. So I'm glad you all are getting to work with him. In your area with this slide over here in this little orange section, so does this mean that we say could not grant money to like a Mountain Bizwork type entity that would meet the criteria of who could receive it solely so that they could have a grant program for, say, like downtown parking monies, or, you know, to help with the events that if you were listening earlier, we went through all these things we want to activate in downtown, but then we have said we'd have to find money to do it, you know. And were you able to, did you listen to all that, or were you not with us then?
I did my best. Could you
Okay.
I don't really
No, that's
follow
okay.
the question.
But we basically talked about just big programs and things, but we needed funding to do it. We needed to alleviate parking revenues. We had to come back with something in the budget that also feeds transit and all this stuff. So why can't some of these funds somehow through all these avenues end up in that use?
It's a good question. So for example, I think what I heard you say is kind of around like parking assistance and maybe parking vouchers. You have to think about who in the end is benefiting from that. And in the end, that's an individual, that's a worker who benefits. And yes, that's a great thing. This program, when it comes to CDBG DR economic recovery type activities, it's really geared toward not the individual, but the job. So that's one thing to consider when we're thinking about forgivable loans or grants. It's really intended for the business to, and this is the performance outcome that we have to report back to HUD. The thing that we have to look at is what are the number of jobs retained and what are the number of jobs created as a result of the investment in that business? How are they able to expand their operations or prevent them from closing in the first place as a result of the investment?
Which we could probably tie to staff having to pay exorbitant fees to park downtown, and it makes people not work downtown. I mean, I just wonder, so I just want to mention it so there's some creativity in there, because James's brain is amazing and he happened to hear all that earlier. So just tying some dots together.
I would just encourage us to really focus on what are the business operation expenses. When you think about a parking voucher, yes, that is needed for the business, but the end beneficiary is indeed the individual worker. And yes, we do want this to benefit workers for sure. We want this to benefit Asheville residents. But when an economic recovery activity is funded, the thing that we're reporting back to is what are the number of jobs? Just want to keep that as our guiding light. Councilwoman Roney.
The number of jobs I think may help to answer my question, but I was thinking back to the COVID-19 ARPA relief funds, and we had our own internal matrix process. And so some of the things that were ranked the highest, like safety at the transit center or building tiny homes for unhoused neighbors, those didn't get funded because we were funding things that were like city operations side. So it sounds like we're kind of like have some more clarity around this one. What rules are there around the AMI for this?
Oh, how long you got? This program, so let's, CDBG-DR overall, 70% of our dollars must benefit folks who are LMI. So that's residents who are low to moderate income, and that's 80% AMI or less. 70% of our program overall must benefit that population. Some of our CDBG-DR programs, like our housing activities, they're going to benefit 100%. They're going to go 100% benefiting LMI households and residents. This program, we've written it into our action plan that this itself will benefit 70%. So 70% of the dollars here at a minimum must benefit LMI residents. Now, there's a few ways that you go about determining whether you're benefiting LMI residents. One is via the presumption based upon where the business is located. If a business is principally located in a census tract whose poverty rate is 20% or higher, you can presume that the jobs there are available to LMI residents. I'll say that again. You can presume that if, based upon where a business is, if the poverty rate of that census tract is 20% or higher, you can presume that the jobs there are available to LMI residents. It's a different threshold for central business districts. For central business districts, like our downtown, the threshold is 30% poverty rate or higher. You can presume. The poverty rate of Asheville downtown is about 27%. So we cannot presume that any jobs downtown are available to LMI residents. Doesn't mean we can't do it. It just means that our administrative and documentation burden is higher. So we actually have to look at the income of the folks who are benefiting from the investment. What's the household income of the workers in those jobs? Not necessarily what they're getting paid by the job. It's the household income that they earn at the time that assistance is received. This is my weeds. This is where I live.
I really appreciate that. I'm going to hold my other questions because I imagine we have folks who are waiting in the queue for public comment.
Sure, thank you. But to answer, there's a lot of ways to go around it. 70%, you got it. Next slide.
James, didn't you work at HUD?
For 7 years, yeah.
Yeah.
So forgivable loans to small businesses, this is a large portion of what we're anticipating this program to be. There will be in the form of forgivable loans to provide small businesses with economic stabilization, job retention. It'll be principally forgiven in whole or in part if the assisted business satisfies specific performance milestones. For example, you don't relocate out of Asheville after a certain number of years. You retain and hire a certain number of jobs. That's all we would really expect. Next slide. I won't get into all these details, but again, just looking, we need to be with our loans for small businesses, working with partner organizations who have the capacity to administer a loan program. And then for the program requirements and restrictions for small businesses to participate in that, we're going to have maximum loan amounts defined in our notices of financial opportunity that will likely exceed what we anticipate doing in like a grant program. And then we're going to have some performance outcomes and expectations written into that to allow those loans to be forgiven. So again, allowable uses, working capital, inventory, or equipment purchases, leasehold improvements that are non-construction, disaster-related gap financing for eligible operating expenses, and costs with job creation, retention, or retooling. Next. Grants. Talk about grants. Unlike grants, these do not require a post-award performance-based repayment. However, businesses will still be required to adhere to all program requirements. And with any program funded through this, the first thing we'll also have to look through what is insurance done for them. This is what I mentioned earlier about duplication of benefit. We have to see what other resources have come to support businesses before these resources can come in. Next slide. Again, just looking at partner capacity considerations, making sure that they have the ability to properly administer this. Program requirements for small businesses. Again, looking at those unmet needs. What are the losses that they've incurred? What other resources have come in? And then we can see what place these grants or loans have behind that. again, these cannot be used for physical construction or improvements to real property. At least that's what we're proposing now, as we're proposing for working capital and operational continuity. Next slide. TA, this takes the form really of looking at how do businesses improve their performance, have better continuity and compliance with recovery objectives. So how do they be more strategic and have better plans and be ready to address operational needs in the face of future disasters or economic downturns? Next slide. Same things. Again, just look, we really have to keep partner capacity in mind. Those program requirements carry through on, having a clear tie back to the unmet needs of the disaster. And then the allowable uses for TA looks like business planning, marketing, communications, e-commerce and technology adoption assistance, financial literacy. These are the kind of things that we typically do with like a business coaching program, but a little bit more advanced toward the technical side. Next. A&E, again, this is architectural and engineering, not actually doing construction, but we can help fund the architectural and engineering design services for businesses that do need to do construction or mitigation, getting ready to prepare themselves for any kind of future disasters. Next slide. All the fun details. Again, just really helping folks on the allowable uses side look at preliminary site assessments, doing schematic design, preparation of construction plans, doing cost estimation for construction and scheduling analysis, and helping them do environmental and code compliance work. Next. I swear I'm getting close to the end. So our eligible small businesses need to meet the SBA size standard, maintain a principal place of business in Asheville, and be independently owned and operated. They all need to demonstrate a status of operation prior to Tropical Storm Helene. They need to have experienced direct impact or disruption resulting from the declared disaster. So for example, if a business stayed open, and I'm not saying any may have done this, but just to show you what we're looking at is if a business stayed open and they made profits hand over fist during the storm, they're not really eligible for a grant program because they didn't experience an economic loss or physical disruption. That's the kind of stuff we're looking at. Next slide. Who's not eligible? All these different types of organizations like cannabis-related operations, adult entertainment businesses, corporate-owned national franchises or chains, anything that's been debarred or listed as suspended, political or lobbying organizations, or passive real estate or investment holdings. Next.
That's cool to see the corporate-owned national chains. Is that a HUD requirement or is that something we're folding in?
That is a HUD requirement, but also in line with SBA standards, Small Business Administration. Now
Yeah,
you can be
our values, so that makes a lot of sense. It's just kind of that's neat to see.
Yeah. Now you could be an independently owned and operated franchise and potentially be eligible, but if you are a corporate-owned national franchise or chain, no, there is a difference, and we didn't want to. I think the SBA doesn't want to exclude folks who are locally owned, mom and pop style, who's operating and owning a franchise. But yeah, it's the corporate owned is the difference. Next slide. This is our award process. As I mentioned, we're going to issue notices of financial opportunity to find those and identify subrecipients. We'll be bringing our recommendations back to this committee and then on to council for your approval, and we'll be scoring them with alignment with recovery goals, community impact, readiness, and their ability to leverage other funding too. And then we'll go through an award process that's contingent on, folks being able to undergo, for small businesses, eligibility, underwriting, and duplication of benefit, as well as establishing those benchmarks for loan repayment or triggers for that. And then we'll be issuing funds based on risk assessment. Next slide. And I know I'm cruising through right now. I'm trying to get to the end. The city, we're responsible for issuing the NOFOs, keeping our compliance and monitoring subrecipients, and providing TA for subrecipients and businesses as well. Our partner organizations will be the implementers of these program activities and getting funds to small businesses in the end. They're going to be responsible for maintaining detailed records, application files, job creation documentation, and other supporting documentation, and cooperate with us when we come in and audit and monitor them. Next slide. So this is our compliance and oversight that we have to do. I think I've mentioned most of these things already, but it's really just making sure that, all activities are done that are eligible. Y'all can go to the next slide. What can businesses do to start getting ready now? This is something that we're going to start communicating really loud and frequently as we get into our implementation phase. Is what can businesses do to be prepared to be grant or loan or TA ready? So are you registered on the federal SAM.gov award management system? Have you gotten all your documentation from the last few years, specifically your business revenue? Have you applied for SBA? Have you worked with your insurance and filed a claim? Identify which poverty census tract your business is located. Remember, that's how we're going to satisfy national objectives with HUD. And what are the income levels of the potential beneficiaries of the grant or loan? That's your employees. Businesses could start doing that early on so that when the grant or loan application cycle actually launches, they've got everything ready. So we're already getting prepared to provide that TA and front load that so folks and small businesses can be ready to get in line and work with us. And again, when it comes to income levels of potential beneficiaries, employees, it's not what the business pays them, it's what their household earns. So you can potentially be making a salary that on your own gets you outside of being low to moderate income, but what we look at is the household, is what the household earns. We don't want to encourage businesses to not pay good wages. Next slide. Y'all know my key takeaways. So we're going to be running grants, loans, TA. We're getting some really great feedback from our folks working with the chamber and Go Local, having those facilitated conversations. We'll be rolling programs out later this year. Thank y'all. Any questions?
I don't have any questions. I was able to review this ahead of time. I'm so grateful. It's hard to imagine how much work has gone so quickly. Y'all have really been sprinting. I know you've heard from me at points where I'm like, why isn't this happening fast enough? And then you talk through what we have to do to ensure that this taxpayer dollars are used fairly and equitably and legally. And so I understand that tension. I think the planning that you're doing is really great. I'm really thrilled that this is getting out into the public too, so that I think the more that folks can anticipate and plan, that's the most we can ask for, right? So I think this is really great work. Thank you. Anything else?
Just major appreciation for you, James. That's a lot of detailed work. It's some of the hardest stuff, the HUD stuff.
It's been as I mentioned to y'all when we got the action plan approved, the most collaborative thing I've ever done. And we've had good help, and we're going to continue having good help, and we're excited to keep doing it. Thank y'all.
Y'all, I should probably take this moment since we're talking with James at HCD today, which is Antoinette and Janika and I. We talked about our work plan, and we talked about, I promise I'll keep this short. We talked about the legacy neighborhoods and the mapping project, displacement, etc. We talked about keeping that at HCD, but also wanting PED to be layered in somehow, and that maybe meant starting with staff. So just a heads up, that might be kind of coming to us in future months. PED is going to talk about it again next month. I'm sorry, I meant HCD.
Great, thank you. Okay, without further ado, we are concluding our third agenda item. I know this has been long, y'all, but I feel like this is the work and it's been really juicy and we've really aligned in a lot of places. So thanks for everyone's endurance and patience, and to the people waiting on public comment. Bless you, we love you. Thank you for waiting it through. But again, this is the tofu making or sausage making or whatever you want to say. So with that, let's move to the fourth agenda item, which is public comment. And Katie, I believe you said we had 2 in the queue. Let's go with the first and see if that changes.
Sure. Caller ending in 5202. Your line is now open and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi there, this is Rachel. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, this is Rachel calling from Sunrise Movement WNC. Thanks for all that really helpful and interesting information. one broad statement, which is just to say that it remains a little disturbing to us that according to the city's own resolution, we are in a climate emergency, that emergency directly contributed to Helene, that this emergency must be tackled urgently to mitigate chances of future Helene-like events happening. And yet this committee, which governs environmental concerns, has not taken up climate change mitigation as a priority during any of the 4 meetings that you've held thus far. So that is a statement of concern. What would we want to see if this committee were actually serious about climate-related goals? Here's a few specifics. We would want to see regular updates on progress towards renewable energy goals, at least quarterly. For example, the percent of county operations running on renewable energy. That's just one example, obviously. We would want to see detailed consideration of how Helene recovery funds are being used to mitigate climate change. So for example, I heard something today about the architectural and engineering design services as part of small business funding. Is there any way to layer sustainability into those architectural and engineering design services? We would also want to see rapid implementation of fiscally neutral policy changes that could contribute to climate change mitigation. For example, the CPACE program, which the county has been discussing doing an enabling ordinance around. Is that something the city is also discussing? Other examples of that are, for example, EV infrastructure requirements. I can send ordinance along. New Hanover passed one recently that requires new parking to contain EV capable charging spaces. Lastly, touching on the CBGDR ideas. So glad James is on today. Emailed you. I know you're very busy, so you haven't reached back out yet. But wanted to replug some of the specific ideas around CBGDR funds for sustainability. Can we build sustainability criteria into NOFO or RFP scoring rubrics so that proposals to build new things like new housing or other things get extra points for incorporating renewable energy? Can we ask for environmental sustainability plans in project proposals that require any kind of new building? Those are just a couple of ideas that I've already sent along, but wanted to shout out. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Share those concerns. We are doing quarterly updates on many of our major buckets, and we haven't had one of our sustainability quarterly updates in a while. You're right, but it's time to get one of those to make sure we know where our progress is happening. Thanks. Katie?
Yes, caller ending in 5711. Your line is now open and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi there, this is Timber Sunrise WNC. Can you all hear me?
Yes,
Sure can.
Wonderful. Yes. Thank you, Rachel, for highlighting those excellent points. I thought I would just, raise the question of how are you seeing public transit and influencing the activation of the downtown space? I think there's a lot of great opportunity there. We know that our local public transportation system is already not meeting the needs of our community in so many ways. And so I would really love to hear some ideas about opportunities that could really revitalize our downtown, support our workers, students, and our visitors, making sure that we have a service that is accessible and that folks want to use. And particularly, I think in relationship to the events and the open streets and the social corridors, I think there are probably some public safety concerns. We want people to come downtown and enjoy it, but we also want them to get home safe. So I think public transportation could be a good solution for that. We talked about these large events that happen at the Civic Center that bring a lot of folks downtown and revenue to downtown. But to get home or back to your hotel from those events, in a safe way, I don't know the last time y'all were trying to catch an Uber or Lyft out of downtown, but that can take potentially hours. And if there were an alternative, bus route or in some of our major corridors that run later, I think that there's a great opportunity there as well. And I think those are some of my major concerns. It might take a bus route to get an hour to pick you up too right now. So waiting for an Uber, but it's more affordable and make it more accessible to residents, visitors, and workers. So thank you.
Thank you. And I know that we'll be talking about transit a lot in the coming months as we're doing a comprehensive operations analysis. So stay tuned for those conversations too. Okay, Katie, do we have anyone else in the queue?
As of now, we do not, but let me just reload the site just to triple check. We don't
Thanks.
have any later calls. Just one moment. No, we do not, Madam Chair. Those were our only two.
Great. Thank you so much. Great long, but great meeting today, everybody. Thanks, staff. Lots of work went into these presentations and thoughtful, quick work. Really appreciate working so fast on behalf of our workers and businesses. All right, everybody. Oh, Kim.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I know that we need to have this conversation kind of in a public setting, but I would be interested in knowing what quarterly reports are coming up next. When I was looking at the future agenda items, I think the community would love to see that we have plans to address those quarterly reports.
Sounds good.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate all the many people that participated in this meeting today. Have a good day.